attendant to go and search all these sites to find for you the right mate, to identify eligible bachelors and compile extensive romantic research to help you find your soulmate. I actually think this is a great idea because I know sometimes, being single, I'm overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed at the idea of finding someone. And at the same time, everyone tells you, well, have you tried online stuff? Well, sure, there's 16 sites and I just don't have 16 hours of my day. Here's my solution.
Well, my understanding of this site is that it actually takes a lot of the guesswork and a lot of the time out of it because they actually respond for you once you connect with a potential mate. And so they continue to respond and even set up dates and give suggestions about what you should do and dress for the date.
That's
which
right.
I think makes it really easy for some people who are really stressed and have a lot of other things on their mind.
Now, does this just work in one direction? It's for women to seek out eligible bachelors, or does it work the other way?
Not if I know our Indian friends. I'm sure it works in both directions. They talked exactly about what you mentioned, Anisha, how basically this is your own personal attendant who looks after every detail for you, so you don't have to worry about it. They'll even tell you, what kind of clothing options would be considered appropriate for your first date or your second date and so forth. I mean, isn't that great?
I think that's terrific. Whether you're married or not, you still sometimes need assistance in figuring out what clothes might be good for a specific event or something like that. I'd be interested to see if I could hire someone in India to go on peapod.com and order my groceries for me.
On my diapers.
Or your diapers or something like that. It doesn't have to be solely for those out there seeking, companionship. It can be for any other type of assistance that might be needed.
I think we need virtual assistants for our families.
There we go.
Well, with all this talk about outsourcing love, I ran into a really interesting article in the New York Times. There's so much hype, and Americans and Europeans are concerned about all these great, jobs being shipped overseas. But there's also a concern for India, now to get serious for a moment, that we're turning more into Scranton, Pennsylvania, kind of the office from the NBC show, than really the source of innovation. Like, we do the work and we're, pushing the buttons and making sure that the paperwork gets done, but is that really where the new ideas are, where the exciting innovations are happening? And maybe not, for a number of reasons, and I think it's something that we really should be thinking more about. This article quotes Mr. Raghavan, an investor in Infosys, and he talked about how India is held up by a financial system that is reluctant to invest in unproven ideas, an education system that really emphasizes rote learning and not necessarily problem-solving creativity, and a culture that looks down on failure for unconventional walks of life or professions. We're always encouraged to go into those things that are tried and true, business, law, medicine, etc., technology. But, for instance, my job doesn't fit into any of those categories, and a lot of people don't even understand what it is. So, in terms of innovation, do you all think that there are some issues for India in getting ahead?
I would say that to some degree, I think the article is correct in saying that when you outsource functions, you're typically outsourcing rote functions. Mm-hmm. You're not outsourcing your innovation because you can't. You always need the intellectual property to stay here, close at hand. But I do think that is the genesis of innovation. I do think that it's just a matter of time for Indians to graduate from doing these kinds of rote activities to taking that next step into entrepreneurship. Indians that came here many years ago, that immigrated here, all did the same kind of leap from being rote functions within companies and becoming part of management over time. And now many have taken that leap to becoming entrepreneurial. And I do think that spirit in India is going to take off. It needed an economic base to be able to do that. And we've given ourselves that economic base now with this outsourcing capability. It's just now a matter of time for people to take that to the next level.
Now, I have to agree. You need economic freedom to think outside the box. And with the outsourcing, research and development has been outsourced to India for quite a while now. It's just that we want to keep the findings here in the United States. But I think what we're seeing right now in India is a change in the tide because of economic freedoms widening up. We have the ability now that, okay, we've done all these things. Let's go on to the next level. Let's try that innovation. It took a while for us to be innovators here in the United States. And it's a historical, cycle. And right now is where India is in their history, where they can now take that next step towards innovation. And I think they'll do that, and they'll do that well, because those minds are the same whether they're in India or here.
And it is the world's largest marketplace.
There you go.
Well, I think my concern is that there are still a lot of institutional barriers, though, in India that kind of discourage that entrepreneurship entrepreneurship. I mean, both of you, Sonal and Aastha, have experienced being your own boss and having your own business. And I hope that Indian laws will catch up to the U.S. in that sense to really encourage that kind of entrepreneurship,
especially through
too.
women. I would say that, you're exactly right. I think maybe men have started to graduate that corner and pull into the land of entrepreneurship. Women probably still haven't quite gotten there yet in India, but I think they're not far behind. Shilpa, I have to ask you, because you said you do something that most of us really can't relate to because we're not doctors, engineers, or medicine. What is it exactly that you do?
Well, right now, I think a lot of our viewers know that I work for the Peace Corps, and my job is really in cross-cultural and diversity training. Unconventional, yes, but essentially I help people to work better together across some of their differences and work with organizations and volunteers who want to find better ways of communicating and being effective in their jobs. So I do a lot of staff development work, a lot of training, and believe me, my parents didn't understand what that was when I told them that this is something that I wanted to do professionally, and yet they have encouraged me in my career, and I'm really happy where I am, and I like what I do.
And I think you should be a role model to other women, the fact that you're going into something like the Peace Corps, which I think has such a fantastic statement to other people. So, power to you.
and the level of satisfaction that you feel every day doing something that you love, you're making a difference. At the end of the day, you're happy with what you've done with your day, and you're satisfied. That's the most important thing. And non-traditional, traditional, who defines these things? Really. I mean, we've got a story here about a young man named Rahul Daniel Singh Coburn. He is taking non-traditional to yet a whole other level. He has aspirations to be an ice dancer in the Olympics.
An ice dancer?
What exactly is an ice dancer?
I guess,
it's all the figure skating without the jumps.
I can only imagine the conversation that he had with his parents when he decided in junior high that this is what he wanted to do with his life. I can only imagine if I had said this to my parents. I mean, I've danced since I was a very young child, but if I had gone to my parents and said, well, instead of that whole law thing that you want me to do, I want to be a dancer. I want to be a professional dancer. I don't think that my parents would have taken it so well. Apparently his parents took it very well and are encouraging him and are supporting him because it's a very expensive endeavor to undertake. And he's a sophomore in high school and he knows what he wants to do. And I think, he needs to be supported.
Ladies, a recent fashion trend for us is to use eyebrow threading instead of the conventional waxing to take care of the hair on our face. I know you guys didn't know we had hair on our face, but we do, and we use things like eyebrow threading to get rid of it. Except a lot of places, especially in different salons around the country, the local governments are cracking down on these eyebrow